I was, 21 years old, and I was taking the bus to Anacostia, and I was told that if I go to this street corner, I could, find a lady named Cinnamon, and I needed to explain to her why she needed to make her court date.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 68 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. My guest today is joining me all the way from Iowa. It is Tim from Iowa Semelroth. As a personal injury attorney for over 25 years, Tim has represented hundreds of Iowans dealing with death or injury due to negligence. He's the first Iowa attorney board certified in trucking accident law by the National Board of Trial Advocacy, and among the first 50 attorneys in the United States to achieve this designation by the NBTA. Tim is a former president for the Iowa chapter of the American Board of Trial Advocates, a former president of the Iowa Association for Justice, and is on the Iowa State Committee of the American College of Trial Lawyers. And in case I haven't mentioned, Tim is from Iowa. He currently serves as faculty for the Trial Lawyers College and is on the Board of Regents for the Academy of Truck Accident Attorneys. Tim, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Hey, I'm excited to be here.
And we were just talking about this before the show. Tim is Tim from Iowa. Everybody knows you as Tim from Iowa. You make the rounds in various CLEs and mastermind groups, and you're quite the prolific speaker these days too. So tell me about that. How is your schedule with all the travel you're doing and still handling a pretty solid caseload back at your firm?
Well, it involves a lot of juggling. I think as I look towards 2025 right now, I'm scheduled to be speaking in like 8 different states so far. But luckily, I have a lot of help here at the office. We have the largest injury and disability firm in Iowa, so we have 17 lawyers, and I can usually find somebody to pinch hit for me if I need it.
There you go. Now, Tim, you and I have known each other for several years now, and we've never really talked about your backstory. So fill me in here. How did you end up, where'd you grow up, and how did you end up in the legal profession?
So I grew up in Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My dad was a factory worker. My mom was a school teacher. I had never met an attorney until I was in 8th grade in junior high. And I tell people that it all started when I decided to super glue my teacher's chair to the floor.
That was your entry into the legal world, huh?
Yes. So what happened was he realized probably with a lot more sympathy and grace than I would have that I probably had too much time on my hands. And so he told me about this new program that they were doing in Iowa called mock trial. And he invited me to try out for the team. And I've been doing it ever since.
And I know you are hugely involved in mock trial, but when you first stood up there, whenever he said, "Hey, Tim, I want you to come try out this mock trial thing," what was going through your mind? Had you ever had any kind of experience with that before? Were you scared to death? Did you think, "Oh man, this could be pretty cool"?
Well, to be honest, he told me that if we qualified for state, I would get a day off of school. And so that was all the motivation I needed.
That is not much. It did not take you much.
No. But I, like everybody else, when you first start public speaking, it can be frightening. I was not a natural public speaker. It was scary at first. But the nice thing about starting anything when you're 14 years old is that you kind of work through all those butterflies. And now occasionally my wife or my kids may ask, "Well, are you nervous about this speech?" And I really don't think about it much anymore. And that's in large part because of mock trial.
Well, all right. So as a trial lawyer, like I get nervous. We have a trial coming up at the beginning of March, and I get butterflies in my stomach just thinking about it right now. I mean, we're kind of in the middle of prep. We're getting everything ready to go. And, I know when I stand up there to start jury selection, I'm going to have big time butterflies. And it's just something, I mean, eventually they go away. I know it's going to happen. And I've had it, I've been there enough times to know, hey, this is what it's going to feel like. This is how it's going to go, and it's all going to be fine. Do you still get butterflies? Do you still get nervous before trial?
I do, but it's not about the speaking in front of people. It's about the preparation. It's like, what you have to do to get ready. And am I going to get a chance to read through this deposition again? Or, have I outlined all of my examinations? Have I double checked to make sure that all our visual aids are going to work? I mean, it's that sort of thing that makes me nervous. The actual standing up and talking in front of people, thankfully, that's something that's gone by the wayside.
Yeah, and I guess I've never really thought about it that way. I think the nerves do come from, it's a huge responsibility going and trying a case for somebody. And even when you have done absolutely everything you can, you've prepared as well as you can, there's still those nerves of how is this going to go? Because we all know, we have our best laid trial plans. And if they even survive the pretrial hearing, they're going to get upset at some point during the trial. And we're going to have to think on our feet. And we're going to have to do this, that, and the other. And that's probably more where the nerves come from, is making sure that you are doing absolutely everything in your power to put the best case forward, knowing you're going to have to think on your feet and change things and do things on the fly. So, yeah, I think I'm probably in the same boat as you. It doesn't really occur to me that I'm standing up there talking to a panel of 60 people, or however big the voir dire panel is, or then eventually the jury and the judge and whatnot. It's the, am I doing the absolute best job that I can be doing for the client? Is everything working the way we need to? Have we missed anything along the way? Because invariably something's going to come up and you're going to be like, ooh, I didn't really think about that.
Absolutely. One of the best observations I've ever been told about trials is that there are 3 versions of every trial presentation that you give. There's the version that there's the trial that you wanted to put on. Mm-hmm. There's the trial that you wish you would put on, and there's the trial that you actually put on. And right. And so it's you always second guess yourself. You always wonder, could I do more? What if I had done this differently? And that's the profession that we've chosen. And so there's always a lot of self-doubt that comes along with it.
Absolutely. And that is whether the result ends up being good or bad. I don't know about you, but even after a good result, I'm still wondering, like, man, I really wish this would have happened this way, or that I would have put this witness on here instead of here. And there's never a right way to go try a case. And you could give both of us the same facts, and we would probably come up with pretty different trials, just based on our personalities and our experiences and what works for us individually.
Absolutely. You can't be somebody that you're not. You have to try a case in a way that is authentic to you. And if you do that, hopefully the jury's going to recognize that you're a straight shooter.
Absolutely. So when you're coaching these mock trial kiddos, how are you instilling that in them? Right? Because a lot of times I assume they probably get together and they're like, hey, I think we should do it this way or do it that way. But then each of them has to individually perform. How do you help them develop their own style, or quite frankly, with your younger lawyers that you're mentoring at your firm?
Well, it's just giving them repetitions, helping them, see it's like, well, what works for you, and making them realize that there are a lot of different ways to do things. One of the things that we do on our mock trial teams is that we have a lot of guest judges come in, whether they are lawyers or actual judges or law professors, and every one of them gives slightly different feedback. And, that can be frustrating when you're a teenager, but I explained to them, yeah, that's real life. It's like you present this case to 10 lawyers, you're going to get 10 different opinions. Your job is to figure out what works for you, who speaks to you, and take that advice and adapt it for your own style.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Fantastic feedback. All right, let's get back to Deviant Tim. So you start gluing chairs to floors. You get sent to mock trial. I assume you fall in love with it and decide that's what you want to do the rest of your life, or was there something else along the way?
No, it really was something that I loved the activity. So at that time, I was about 90 pounds and I was about 5 feet tall. I was very small for my age. And so, the coaches of the athletic teams at my school were not beating down my door to get me to try out.
Right.
I wrestled. I was a wrestler in high school, but that had more to do with the fact that the coach looked at me in the hall and said, "You know what? I bet that kid could make the 90-pound weight class without having to cut weight."
Right.
So, but what I realized was when I was in a trial setting, it's like I could, I could be a star. I could, I could command the room, and so I liked it. I did it in high school. I did it in college. And from there, law school was just the natural next step.
And so when you went to, where'd you go to college?
I went to Drake University.
All right. And then where'd you go on to law school?
The University of Iowa.
All right. So you're at University of Iowa Law School. Did you know exactly what you wanted to do? Did you know that you wanted to be a PI attorney, or did you kind of just know you wanted to be in the courtroom in some capacity?
At first, it was I knew I wanted to be in the courtroom. But one of the nice things about mock trial and also the clerkships you can do is I had a chance to try a lot of different things. I had a mock trial coach who was a prosecutor, so I got a chance to see what her life was like. I clerked for small plaintiffs' personal injury firms. I clerked for 400 lawyer firms in Phoenix, Arizona. I clerked for a federal judge. And so all of those things helped me sort of by process of elimination, figure out that what was going to be most enjoyable to me and most fulfilling to me was to be a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer.
So most of those internships, clerkships, I would assume take place over the summer. So it sounds like you were in Phoenix. The Iowa kid is in Phoenix in the middle of the summer. How was that?
Well, I learned an important lesson, and that is you should never drive a black car in Phoenix in the summer. I would have to pull out a section of the newspaper every morning and use it to put my key in the ignition. Otherwise, I would burn my fingers.
Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah. And even before that, I actually worked as an investigator at a criminal defense clinic in Washington, D.C. My last year of college. And so I got a chance to see what life was like in different parts of the country and ultimately decide I wanted to come back home.
All right. So I know there's a story that goes along with the DC clerkship. Tell me about that.
All right. So I was working for a place called DC Law Students in Court, and it's a legal clinic where all the DC law schools can send their students to get real world experience. So this is the early 90s in Washington, DC. It is the height of the crack epidemic. And so the reality is that most other, minor crimes were not something that the justice system was focusing on. So
right.
My job when I worked for this clinic was I was to go get our clients who were charged with prostitution and convince them to make their court date, because if they did, they would just get a slap on the wrist and be able to go about their way. But if they did not make their court date, the next time they got picked up, they would be locked up for a while. So I was 21 years old, and I was taking the bus to Anacostia, and I was told that if I go to this street corner, I could, find a lady named Cinnamon, and I needed to explain to her why she needed to make her court dates. So that was a large part of my job in that clerkship. And I was always worried, because this is before cell phones, right? And my mother was going to call, the apartment that I was staying at, and my roommate was going to say, "Oh, Tim's not here right now. He's trying to pick up prostitutes in Anacostia."
Yeah, I can see 21-year-old Tim looking incredibly uncomfortable as he goes and tries to track down prostitutes all day in Washington, D.C. Yeah, I can see why you didn't really want to pursue maybe that line of legal representation.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it made me appreciate how the rest of the country views Iowans, because I would, like go to a street corner and there's maybe some guys hanging out, next to the liquor store, and I would say, "Hey, I'm looking for Sandy, and and they would look at me, and there'd be a little bit of I guess suspicion, and then I would say, "My name's Tim, and I'm from Iowa," and immediately all their defenses would melt, because they realized that it's I remember my first day as I was going about doing that, somebody tried to, or offered to sell me some crack, and I went back to the clinic, and I told the supervising attorney, "Oh my gosh, somebody tried to sell me drugs." And they said, "That's fantastic, Tim." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because that means you don't look like a cop." And so that's
when you're trying to track down prostitutes, not looking like a cop, I would imagine, is helpful as well.
Yeah. So that's when I first realized that being from Iowa can be a superpower.
There you go. And you've fully embraced it at this point in life, I can see. All right. So you end up graduating University of Iowa Law School. And then did you stay in Iowa?
Yep. I got a clerkship with a judge actually in my hometown. And while I was clerking for him, several people were trying to introduce me to a couple of lawyers who had started a personal injury firm in Cedar Rapids, and so it just so happened that one of those lawyers was my judge's next door neighbor, and so it was kind of meant to be. It was kind of meant to be, and so I was their first hire. There were just three of us at first, and that was the start of everything.
And so that's the firm that you're still with today. Oh,
yes,
wow!
I tell people I've had the same parking spot for 27 years.
That's amazing. So I know we mentioned judicial clerkships quite a bit, but for people who don't understand what that means, tell us what that is. What do you do for a judicial clerkship?
Well, you are working shoulder to shoulder with a judge, and in my case, it was a trial judge, and you are helping them by researching, drafting their opinions, their rulings. And so the judge that I clerked for, I was very fortunate because he wanted his clerk in the courtroom whenever there was a trial, so that he didn't have to get me up to speed on, the evidentiary issue that he was having to decide. And so because of that, in 1 year, I had a chance to watch almost a dozen big trials where I was, my judge was presiding over. And then on top of that, the other clerks in the building, we would call each other when anything cool was happening in our courtrooms. And so I probably watched 24 parts of 24 trials during 1 year clerking for this judge.
Man, I tell you what, there is nothing that I think provides more confidence for a law student, a new lawyer, than going and watching real trials, because I think it takes a lot of the mystique out of it. And you realize, the lawyers trying these cases aren't nearly as good as I would expect a lot of these lawyers to be. Right now, I've seen some absolutely amazing trial lawyers. I have gotten to watch some of the best in the world try cases. And I've seen some that I'm wondering, do they have any idea what they're doing? right? And I always tell law students, go watch trials. Go watch trials. You're going to learn, even from bad lawyers, you're going to learn, and it's going to develop confidence in you because you're going to see, okay, this is something I can actually do.
Absolutely. The way I put it, to my wife and my parents when I decided I was going to do a clerkship, because obviously the government doesn't pay you particularly well. As I said, listen, I'm going to be spending the rest of my career trying to convince judges of things. It would be nice to spend a year figuring out what's important to them and see behind the curtain about how they make decisions.
Yeah, that's an amazing thought process for sure. And I'm assuming that you got quite a bit of clarity during that year on exactly what judges are worried about and how they come to making those decisions. Even though every judge is different, they have the same concerns.
Absolutely. One thing that I tell, the newer lawyers in our firm is that, judges are too busy. They can't dot every I and cross every T. They have to rely upon the lawyers who are bringing them, an argument, briefing, that the lawyers are doing it right. And so judges will give you the benefit of the doubt. However, the first time that they catch you being sloppy, the first time they catch you misstating something, they will never trust you again. And as my former partner said, all the judges talk about the lawyers in front of them whenever they're together. And so it is the reputation that you have as a conscientious advocate, as somebody who can be trusted, is gold when it comes to dealing with judges.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So when you first started at the PI firm after your judicial clerkship, how quickly were you in there doing, depositions, experts, trying cases?
Pretty fast. They were at that time. They were primarily a boutique plaintiffs medical malpractice firm.
Oh,
and so I knew, I knew how to take a deposition. I knew how to write motions, and so for the first 5-6 years of my practice, I was just supporting them. Work was just being handed to me. And so a lot of it was litigation. So the point I'm trying to make is I had almost no involvement in the pre-litigation side of the personal injury practice for the first 5 years. It was all litigation based.
And then what happened after those first 5 years? What changed?
Well, eventually they wanted me to start developing my own clients, get my own cases. And then after a year or two, one of the founding lawyers went off to become a judge. And so that is when I was quickly thrust into the role of, hey, you now have to fend for yourself. You need to bring in cases. You need to run cases from beginning to end. You can't just be somebody's second chair or be handed off a case that somebody else has worked up.
Yeah, you got to start making it rain. You can't just be a grinder anymore. So when that happened, when your partner went off and became a judge and you had that discussion with the other partner, what was going through your mind? Were you scared to death? Were you excited? Did you have any idea what your next steps were going to be?
Oh, it was frightening because, all of a sudden there were all these things that they were doing to keep the lights on, to get new cases that I had never had to think about. And so 5 years in, 6 years in, all of a sudden it's like, okay, this, you got to start dealing with this now. And I was always worried, where is the next case going to come from? Where is, are we going to get enough, money coming through the door this month? And so it was definitely a rude awakening for me.
So walk me through kind of the process of you have that conversation, you realize, okay, I've got to start paying attention to this stuff. I assume that meant you had to go learn, right? How did you do that? How did you basically form that foundation to become this guy who can now bring in cases and help build the law firm?
Well, it's funny. A lot of it was just my age and where we were technologically. So, for example, this was before when I started at the firm. Firms didn't have websites, right? And so, all of a sudden, the Westlaw representative says, "Hey, we're going to do a little workshop on websites." And so my partner looks at me and says, "You're the young guy. You go figure out what a website is."
Right.
And we were getting ready to sign our yellow book, our Yellow Pages contract, and so I went and bought a book on how to design an effective Yellow Pages ad, so that I could put my 2 cents in regarding that. So I tell people I have been a student of marketing and a student of legal marketing in particular for going on over 22 years now, and it started gradually, but then ultimately I realized that one of the most valuable things I can do for the firm is help guide our marketing.
And so at what point was there kind of a transition in your mind of, okay, I need to learn about marketing. I still got to bring in cases. I got to be a trial lawyer. When did the transition happen to, okay, I am going to go all in on this marketing thing and I am going to learn as much as I possibly can. And that's going to be, a huge part of what I bring to the firm?
Well, I think it was a gradual process, but I'll tell you the event that I remember, and this is sort of my baptism by fire as an owner, is that when one of the founding partners left to become a judge, we brought in my current partner, Presley, and for the first year or two that he was with the firm, the remaining founding partner kind of dealt with all the finances, and slowly kind of exposed us to those sorts of things. But one day he just came to us and said, "You know what? I'm done financing the firm. It's time for you guys to deal with that." And we didn't really know what that meant. But he had a place down in Colorado, and he would always leave for the holidays. And so I still remember very clearly in January, he had been gone for like 4 or 6 weeks, and our office manager came in and said, "Hey, we don't have any money to pay payroll. No settlements have come in the past 2 weeks. What do you want to do?" And Presley and I looked at each other, and that's when we realized that hey, we need to go qualify for a loan, and more importantly, I had to go home to my wife and tell her why I was writing a check to our law firm.
Oh, yeah, that's a scary position to be in. That is absolutely saying, "All right, guys, it's yours. I'm out." As you stepped into kind of that, I'll call it an ownership position, right? If you're in charge of finances and marketing and bringing everything in, what surprised you the most? What was something that was all of a sudden thrown on your plate that you had no idea either was out there or how extensive it was?
Well, just how many things you have to be good at. You have to be good at finances. You have to be good at dealing with vendors. You have to be good at dealing with your insurance issues, banking issues. And so luckily for me, I always had a partner. And so we kind of divided up the ownership responsibilities sort of based upon what we were good at. And so marketing got put on my lap, and a lot of those things, managing our trust account, things like that, were things that I was able to rely on my partner to handle.
Yeah, that is, having a partner from the get-go is huge, right? Because you're both learning together. You have somebody to bounce ideas off of. You have somebody to split responsibilities with, but you also have, an extra mouth to feed, right? That your partner's got a family, and y'all have got to make, essentially double the revenue to make things work. So here you are today, and you go speak all over the country. What are some things, if you were starting a law firm right now, or say you're speaking to someone who's about to start their law firm, on the marketing side of things, what would you tell them, like the 3 or 4 things that they would absolutely need to do right off the bat would be?
The first thing I would say is start making your list. And by that, I mean, it's the people that you're interacting with. Hopefully you're a good lawyer, right? That's table stakes.
Yeah.
But the
That's
next step is you have to remain in contact with those past clients, people you've interacted with as witnesses, people you've been on, you went to law school with, or that you've been on bar committees with. You need to find a way to remain present in their lives, because your best cases in the personal injury space are going to come from referrals from people who know, like, and trust you.
Right.
And so that's number one. I mean, if I could go back in time to, Tim, when he was in law school, I would say, hey, get the mailing addresses of all of your classmates and start sending them holiday cards. I'm old enough that social media kind of became popular after, I had already gotten out of school. And so at first I didn't put much time or effort into it, but
Right.
Now I recognize that social media is a tool that you can use to remain top of mind in all the people in your life. And that's going to be what it takes, because anybody can get in a truck accident. Anybody can be the victim of medical malpractice. And so it's impossible to direct market to the people who you want to hire you. So you really do need to build your brand and maintain your brand with the people who know, like, and trust you.
Yeah. So I know you have recently, over the last year or so, become much more prolific on LinkedIn. What drew
Yes.
you to LinkedIn, and how are you using it to your advantage?
So it all started with, you have to know your numbers. And so, I can tell you at the drop of a hat that, 40% of our new cases come from the general public through whatever mass marketing we do. 40% of our cases come from referrals from people that we've done business with or know us from the community, word of mouth. And then approximately 20 to 25% of our cases come from referrals from other lawyers. And so when we were looking at that data back in 2023, we then looked at, okay, well, where does our money come from? That's where our cases come from, but where does our income come from? And what we realized is that even though the attorney referred cases only make up 20, 25% of our new cases, they make up 40, 50% of our income most years. And that's because, the best cases are often referrals from other lawyers. And so we started asking ourselves, what could we do systematically to try to get more cases referred from other attorneys? And enough people had talked to me about LinkedIn and its value as a social platform that became the cornerstone of our strategy.
Yeah, and it seems like it's really been working for you too, based on conversations we've had. When you put together LinkedIn posts, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Like, where are you coming up with your material? I know you post a lot of video on LinkedIn. What is without getting too in the weeds, what is your strategy towards creating engaging posts?
So first of all, you have to know who you're trying to reach. And so on LinkedIn, I'm trying to be interesting, educational, entertaining to other lawyers. And so any posts that I do, whether it is a video, whether it is text, whether it's text with a picture, I try to create it from the perspective of, would other lawyers find this interesting? Because that's that's my audience on LinkedIn. I want them to know that that I'm out there and I'm available if they need something in Iowa. So know your audience. That's number one. Number two is what is your message? And so For me, I just want to remind the lawyers on LinkedIn that my name's Tim. I'm from Iowa, and if you have any legal issues in Iowa, I'm the guy you should call. There are only 3 million people in the state of Iowa, and if my firm can't help you with that issue, can't tell you about that judge, I guarantee you, we know who can.
Yeah, I love that, because I think a lot of people approach LinkedIn, if they even dip their toes in the water, right? Because you're putting yourself out there on LinkedIn. I feel like more so than on social media, other platforms, the Facebooks and Instagrams, because this is more of a professional setting, and you're really putting yourself out there, and you're taking some stances, you're putting information out there, and people aren't always receptive to that, and they'll fight back. And so I think a lot of people just avoid it altogether. But having the audience in mind, I think, is huge, because I see so many people posting on LinkedIn, and it may be good stuff, but I have no idea what they do. I have no idea who their target market is. They're just appealing to people to seemingly just get likes or connections. And to me, that just seems like a waste of time. You're not really accomplishing the end goal of creating more business.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of great posts about, the 3 things to do after you've been involved in a car accident, or, that sort of thing. And that's appropriate information for the general public. For me personally, when I'm on LinkedIn, I assume that most lawyers know those things. And so, I want them to listen to me and pay attention to me. And so I'm going to give them insights that maybe they don't know. Maybe they haven't thought about the importance of having, associating with a lawyer who has a good relationship with local law enforcement, or maybe they don't know that Iowa has a special fund where victims of crimes can go and get compensation before maybe they would ever get money for a settlement or a verdict. Those are the sorts of things that, if I'm talking about the law, I'm trying to give insight to the maybe it's the out-of-state lawyer, maybe it's the real estate lawyer, maybe it's the family law lawyer who will at some point be approached by my ideal client. So somebody who's been injured in a truck accident in Iowa, and hopefully I've entertained them or educated them, or at least been interesting enough that they remember who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Tim, we have time for one more question. So we'll finish it up with the same question I always ask. Give me your top 3 books that you would recommend. It can be fiction, nonfiction, whatever.
Sure. So this is going to show recency bias for the first 2, because these are, the first 2 books are books that I read last year that I just loved. And I'm kind of a nonfiction or business development sort of reader for the most part. So I highly recommend Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're ever considering getting an executive assistant or a virtual assistant, just the process that he uses and the meeting rhythm is fantastic. The second one is Unreasonable Hospitality. And that's a book written by the front of the house partner in what at one point was the #1 restaurant in the world. And it talks about ways that you can improve your business by focusing on hospitality and the experiences that your customers have. I'll tell you, you could make a law firm management course just out of that book.
Wow.
There are just so many good tips. And then the last book is an oldie but a goodie. I think it's 17 years old, and it's Atul Gawande's The Checklist Manifesto. And I remember reading that when it first came out. It's a book written by a Boston surgeon, and it talks about how in modern life, most professions are too complicated to be able to keep everything up here. And how doesn't matter whether you're a pilot It doesn't matter if you're a surgeon. It doesn't matter if you're a architect or a lawyer. There are processes that are important to do your best work, and there is no better way to keep track of those than a good old-fashioned checklist.
That's right. And those checklists just help make sure, hey, you're not missing steps, right? That doesn't mean that you're going to do it the same every single time, but you're at least thinking through or checking off the boxes that every step has been taken, and it's out of your head and onto a piece of paper, so you don't have to remember the order. Tim from Iowa, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you being on. And thank you to everyone who tuned in to this episode of the Driven Crowd podcast. We'll see you next time.